Part 1. What's the worst wedding speech you've ever heard? I was attending the wedding of my best friend's older sister. It was an absolutely gorgeous wedding in the bride's parents' backyard, which her dad had spent the better part of a year landscaping and perfecting for this occasion. I think it's important to note this because despite being in a backyard, it was very much a classy event. The bride and groom were in their mid-20s, had been together since their junior year of high school, and had both gone on to become teachers. Truly two of the best people that I know. My BFF was one of two maids of honor, the other being the bride's best friend since age 5, we'll call her Pam, and the best man was the groom's best friend since high school, we will call Mark. I've known all of these people for a very long time, so I'm not sure what I was expecting, but it wasn't what happened. Pam went first, and from the moment the DJ put a mic in her hand, it was a disaster. First and foremost, she was absolutely drunk, so she's stumbling all over the dance floor while attempting to give her speech. The entire speech is essentially just incoherent inside jokes between Pam and the bride, which it seems that the bride can barely understand because Pam is slurring her words so badly. Champagne was this girl's drink of choice, so because of the carbonation after every single sentence, she was hiccup burping and then saying, okay. She eventually reached the end of her speech, never once mentioned the groom, did not actually toast the bride or groom, and flitted off inside the bride's parents' house. When she returned 20 plus minutes later, she was no longer in her bridesmaid's dress and was wearing a pair of my beef's jeans and a sweatshirt from her childhood bedroom. She proceeded to spend the night twerking barefoot with one leg hiked up on her husband's shoulder in front of the bride and groom's elderly relatives. Wow, Mark was up after Pam, and I think everyone was expecting better. Mark begins a lovely speech about how he and the groom had met, how they had become best friends in high school, and how when the bride and groom got together, Mark knew that it was the real deal and that they would be together forever. Cue 100 eyes from the crowd. But notes Mark, things could have turned out very differently. Why, you ask? Because Mark decides to share with everyone on the happiest day of his best friend's life that the groom originally had a crush on Pam, the maid of honor, and wanted to ask her out back in high school, not his now wife. However, another one of their friends had asked Pam out first, so the groom ended up asking the bride out instead. The room is dead silent, it's so awkward. Everyone's looking around at each other in shock. Mark is giggling into the mic and finishes up his speech with something along the lines of, well, thank goodness everything happens for a reason, cheers, and scampers off the stage. Luckily, the bride and groom are unnecessarily good sports and did not seem upset by either of their speeches, but holy cow, was everyone else appalled. My BFF and her dad both gave absolutely wonderful toasts after those two to kind of make up for them, but my family and I still talk about those two train wrecks on a regular basis. The bride and groom have been very happily married for almost 10 years and have two beautiful daughters, so all's well that ends well. But good lord, if you're giving a wedding toast, please read it to at least one other person before you get that mic in your hand. Part 2. What's the worst wedding speech you've ever heard? At my first wedding, I had my high school best friend do a speech. We didn't have any attendance, so I just picked whoever I thought would be nice to have speak. My first choice friend said no, he'd rather not speak in public, so I asked my bestie. Well, to start with, his outfit was rather unique and unexpected, especially for a wedding. He wore a belt buckle that said R with a pirate flag and a tie that was way too short, and cargo pants with Doc Martens boots to go with his dreadlocks, which weren't put in by a hairdresser, they were just the result of him not owning a hairbrush. None of which I really minded. He was my bestie and I knew what he was like. But then it came to the speech. He proceeded to give a 20-minute speech, at least 10 minutes of which was him ending every sentence with so yeah, like as an example I just pulled from the video. Well, we met in year 11 when she came to the school. I'd already been at the school for years, but she was new, so yeah, I showed her around and we just, became friends, so yeah. She's really nice though, she's good value, so yeah. Dear lord, it was hilariously awkward. He clearly hadn't prepared or practiced anything and the speech just would not end. Another crazy speech was not at my wedding but at my cousin's. Her brother was her husband's best man. Her brother got up and said, quote, I only met her husband a few months ago and it looks like he doesn't have any friends, so he asked me to be his best man and make a speech. Then it was followed up by the groom's speech, which he started off saying, quote, what many of you don't know is that I do card tricks. Then he did a 10-minute performance. Thankfully my cousin is into that and loves him very much. They are happy. Part 3. What's the worst wedding speech you've ever heard? I have a few of these. The first was a wedding in Scotland. The English best man started with a bunch of anti-Scottish jokes that went down like a lead balloon. He then told a story of which the punchline was how he's witnessed the bride getting rear-ended by her now husband. He was sitting at the same table as her parents and the Catholic priest who did the service. Then he started to cry. The second was a wedding where the bride and groom had a lovely meet-cute story. There were 7 speeches. Each of the speakers told the exact same story of that meet-cute. Each of them told it as if it was new to the audience, including delivering the details like a punchline. They had all heard the others. None of them adjusted their speeches or chose not to speak. They just went through with it 7 times over. By the third time there was audible mutters of, quote, are you bloody joking, going round. By the 7th, people were literally putting their faces in their hands when the speaker started yet again with, let me tell you how these two met. I just cannot grasp how none of the speakers thought, actually I'll cut that paragraph on the fly. But they didn't. The third was a wedding where the bride's mother spoke for almost an hour, mentioning pretty much everyone in the marquee by name except her daughter, who she didn't mention at all. The best man then spoke for another 45 minutes. He also did not mention the bride. We had 1 glass of champagne to get us through the nearly 2 hours of this. There was only 40 minutes left for dancing in the end. The fourth is a wedding I went to last year where someone performed a long poem they had made up all about the bride's life, which didn't mention the groom until about 3/4 of the way through. I was literally stuck at the table. I use a wheelchair, the other seats were long benches, so once I'd parked up at my table there was no way to escape without asking at least 10 people to stand up and push the bench in. I really needed the loo, but I kept thinking surely it can't go on for much longer. It was 40 minutes long. As soon as it ended, my husband jumped up and started shepherding people out of my way because he could see how uncomfortable I was. Part 4. What's the worst wedding speech you've ever heard? I have 3. One was my cousin's small wedding with 30 people or so. After the maid of honor and best man gave speeches, for whatever reason the microphone started getting passed around for awkward impromptu speeches and congratulations. It culminated with my cousin Bert, who is a 78-year-old man married for 60 years, telling the groom to, quote, enjoy married life now while she's young and still has her looks. The whole room just open-mouthed stared in silence until Bert's wife said, quote, Jesus Christ, Bert, and broke the silence. The other terrible speech was at my other cousin's wedding. For context, she met her fiancé when she moved from home and joined a new church and started her life over. She meets a super nice guy as part of a group there and has the leader of this church group of officiate this wedding. Wedding takes place at a fancy country club where the groom's parents are from many states away from where she and groom are living now. Bowser said. Everyone is seated at the tables and maid of honor gives her speech. She proceeds to mention every single one of the bride's exes, of which there are many, by name, and caps it off with a but finally she found perfect man and decided to settle down with the groom. This was all in front of the groom's family where they met in a church group where the officiant is someone the bride and groom see all the time for church activities. It was like watching a train wreck. Everyone was mortified, but no one was able to stop the maid of honor. Frankly, I was surprised the DJ didn't cut the mic. Needless to say, my cousin doesn't talk with this former friend any longer. The third bad speech was I once went to the wedding of a rather devout Christian couple. The groom's speech was very moving until the part where he thanked the bride's mother for such a wonderful, precious gift. He said, quote, I can't wait to unwrap her tonight. Jaws were dropped.